Hi, this is Dr. Randy Bach, and I'm the president of the Newton Taxpayers Association. I'm honored to be here today on Newton TV with an incredible guest. You should follow us on Facebook at Newton Taxpayers Association. We are standing up for smart spending, it says there. And right now I'm sitting down to be standing up for smart spending, but moreover for responsible governance. And my guest tonight is Mr. Steve Snyder. He's a Navy veteran. He has experience in the financial district and investment, working at Fidelity in a career, and he's doing real estate projects right now. And he's a freedom-loving Newton citizen. That shouldn't be an oxymoron, but it might be within the city council. So Steve, tell us a little about what interested you to come here and talk to us about a concern.
Well, thank you very much, Randy, for having me. I kind of came into this accidentally. About a year ago, I was at an event and heard someone mention that nicotine-free generation had become an issue in a number of states, or communities around the town. And that was, the idea was that they would introduce legislation to prevent people from ever buying tobacco products above a certain age. And I'm not a smoker. I don't carry water for the tobacco companies, but this struck me as a huge infringement on personal freedom and liberty. So I started looking into it because about a month later, Mayor Fuller sent an email around saying that nicotine-free generation had come before the Newton City Council and they were beginning to evaluate it. So I got interested. I started researching it. I looked at the tapes from the previous meeting. I attended the Program and Services Committee in June. And I didn't like what I heard because essentially they were saying we need to prevent people from buying nicotine. Let me explain what the nicotine-free generation is. Rather than simply saying once you turn 21, you can't buy or you can buy tobacco, what it says is if you're born after a certain date, in this case March 1st of 2004, you can never buy nicotine products in Newton. So someone who's 22 now can, but someone who will turn 22 shortly will not be able to buy them. Then 10 years from now, you could be 30 and you won't be able to buy them. So the whole point was, this struck me as a real infringement on personal liberties. I started writing to my city councilors. I called a bunch of them. I started attending meetings. And to make a long story short, it passed. The city committee, the Program and Services Committee met in January. They passed it to the city council, who in late January approved it. But I think it's a really gross injustice. And so I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about how I came to be involved with it.
No, absolutely. No, I'm trying to think, as we were in our green room, getting, in front of the huge banquet and buffet we have,
Yeah.
for our shows, we were talking about whether this law has ever been enacted anywhere in the country. It's kind of, I'm thinking, having seen kind of, cartoons and whatnot growing up and shows, Leave It to Beaver, whatnot, some kid, it's like, hey, will you, help me buy, a pack of cigarettes or a beer or whatever. Some kid, passing along the money to a 19-year-old or 18, whatever the age happens to be. But now it's going to be some 50-year-old potentially down the road
Yep.
who goes along to a 53-year-old and says, hey, buddy,
That's exactly
I want
it.
some smokes, whatever. It's like, it seems like it's an unequal distribution of rights, and we all don't like the idea of abrogating civil rights.
So, so this is crazy. As I started looking into it, I couldn't figure out why this could be allowed. Brookline was the first city or town in Massachusetts to do this. And it turns out the history in 2019, the legislature passed a flavored tobacco ban. And they didn't clarify, even though they intended that the age to purchase tobacco products was 21, they didn't clarify that in the law. So what that meant was when Brookline passed this legislation in 2020, the convenience stores sued, and that went to the state Supreme Judicial Court. They sued because they lose a lot of revenue by not being able to sell tobacco products. So they sued. It went all the way to the state Supreme Judicial Court, which amazingly said because there's no constitutional right in the state constitution to allow the sale or purchase of tobacco, they're not taking away a right if they forbid the purchase of tobacco to anybody. And that seemed outrageous to me. So as I said, that kind of got me going on this. So over the course of like 6 or 7 months, I tried to learn more about this, and I tried to figure out first what the arguments were for the city, why the city council was proposing this. And I honestly think it was being driven by a relatively small band of anti-smoking activists who just don't like smoking and want to place their this is all personal opinion on mine behalf, don't want to permit smoking. They just don't like it because what they've actually done with the legislation won't have its desired impact, its desired effect. So what they said first was, cancer is the second leading cause of death in the U.S., and lung cancer is the most common form, and smoking contributes to about 80% of lung cancers. So accepting that is true, yes, lung cancer deaths are a serious problem in the U.S. Most people, 95% of smokers, take it up before they're 21. So that I'll stipulate that those are all true. But then they went on to say, this is a public health hazard, and it's not a contagious disease. Smoking's not contagious. It's an individual hazard, certainly. I'm not a smoker, and I don't think people should smoke. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy. But it's a choice that people make. But their claim was that implementing this would discourage tobacco use, especially in younger people, and it would also make it harder, add friction to people who are old enough to buy tobacco to make it challenging for them. In this case, if you're 30, 10 years from now and you want to buy tobacco in Newton, you have to go to the next town. So I won't doubt their intentions are good to try and save lives, but I don't agree with using kind of the heavy hand of government to tell people what they can and can't do with respect to their own bodies.
Yeah, I get all that, and I think I would maybe have a little more respect for it if they just said, like Belmont, when I moved to Boston, late 80s, Belmont, and maybe for a long time thereafter, was alcohol-free. And I think Arlington was also alcohol-free. So we would go to restaurants, and they would let you bring a bottle of beer. And I had traveled cross-country, decades before, and well, not that many decades, but a decade before, and I'd been to Utah, and there was a whole thing about clubs. And I lived in West Virginia for a year, and they had clubs. There was no somebody selling alcohol. You had to join the club. You pay $1, you become a club member. Anyway, so there's kind of like these reverse stimulus to get people to modify their behavior, make it a little more difficult to go out drinking, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Okay, fine. Well, be consistent, be categorical about it, and say, you know what, we are a dry nicotine town.
Yep.
And moreover, we don't like this smoking thing at all. We're going to close the marijuana shops, those darn marijuana shops, because people will be smoking some of that stuff. And by Jiminy, they're beginning.
That's exactly it. Yeah, as a matter of fact, so the one piece of evidence that I would say shows that this is not about people's health is that they banned, or the nicotine-free generation ban applies to non-cigarette products like vapes and e-cigarettes and pouches and things like that. It does apply. Any nicotine-containing product.
Right.
Well, nicotine is, as I said, it's addictive.
That's not the problem.
But it's not. Right. It doesn't cause lung cancer. So, if you allowed the sale of products like that without smoking, it's the tobacco that causes the problems. If you allowed the sale of nicotine vapes or other products, again, I'm not a user, you would allow people to have the rush that they get from nicotine without the long-term medical consequences. They could have done that, and they didn't. So that's what tells me up front that this is not looking out for people's long-term health care. This is looking out for...
No, it's a funny thing. Yeah, there's all kinds of addictions out there. I have a few, I guess. I watch the Celtics on a regular basis, and what else? I like to play tennis and squash. Yeah. But obviously there's some other ones out there. Caffeine's addictive.
There, cannabis. There are a lot of products that are unhealthy if used excessively or
Right.
incorrectly. Cannabis, alcohol, gaming, and so on. Cannabis has actually been implicated. A study from BU a few years ago implicated cannabis in about 20% of vehicular deaths.
Huh.
So, cannabis seems to me to be a much bigger issue. But of course, part of the difference is the state gets revenue, the city gets revenue from the sale of cannabis in the city. They don't get revenue from the sale of tobacco
Oh my goodness.
in the city.
Huh.
So that is, I think, part of it.
That's your financial wizardry at play here. It's only because you're a financial analyst that you are able to figure that out.
No, because it's because I'm awake and concerned.
Yeah,
So, so that's the first hypocrisy, and there are many others. Second, it's not really the government's choice or decision to decide what you can and can't do with your own body. I think we had a big debate over that over the last several years of where the limits of bodily autonomy are,
Right.
and without going into that in detail, they're trying to tell you that they know better than
Right.
you do what's good for you.
Right. Well, that is a thing that government can get away with to a certain extent, right? I mean, they put the stripes on the streets, and you're supposed to walk there versus over
Yeah.
there. Okay, it's probably more healthful to walk on the stripes, on the zebra stripes, than it is to walk in the middle of the street. Fine. And maybe bike helmets, whatever. I mean, I tend not to wear them on a short run, whatever. But okay, fine. But what they've done here is I think you really hit the nail on the head about the cannabis not falling into this. I mean, during COVID, they closed down churches and kept cannabis open.
Yeah.
So there's something there. They kept the methadone clinics open, and not churches. And so there's all different kinds of ways that people can have longevity. Frankly, one you don't really see from the Board of Health in our schools and whatnot is that frankly marriage and going to church actually add years to your life. Now the jokesters will say it only feels
feels
that
longer.
way. But I've got my little handcuff on here, and it's like once you submit, you learn to love it. Anyway, but the fact of the matter is that people they live longer because they have a more modulated life, being married, belonging to a church and so forth. They're going to less likely to go hang gliding while on cocaine and meth, whatever, hallucinating and so forth.
Yeah.
So less likely to do those things, and therefore you live longer. But it's almost never discussed. Kids, get married, go to church. More important than the food pyramid is the worship pyramid or something like that. There's nothing like that, or the marriage pyramid. Nobody ever discussed this stuff. So it's very selective as far as like taking care of our health for us, helping us get better.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you have the floor back in a second, but just as a medical doctor, I don't have the study in front of me, but some time ago, I saw a study that said, that the smoking toke, is actually provides as much tar from a single joint as pack of cigarettes do, because people treat it differently. Cigarettes, they're like kind of like smoking and sculpting the air with the cigarettes, and they have the thing lying around. It's a little bit of a prop, whatever. But with the marijuana, depending on the price and whatnot, they take it and hold in their lungs so long that the tar has more time to dissipate and get in. So never the nicotine. I don't know if there's any nicotine in cannabis. Marijuana leaves, whatever. But let's say there's not. That has other things that bring you back to it.
It's a problem issue, yeah.
And it's the settled, tar, that tarry stuff that's a product of burning that's going to inflame the lungs. That's what does it. So it's not nicotine. So getting people off nicotine is neither here nor there as far as lung damage goes.
And it's not the purpose of the nicotine-free generation is to get people off nicotine. I think your solution is just smoke but don't inhale, right? So the purpose is not to get rid of nicotine use. And again, I thought that there were a number of deceptive things that they said to try and get this. Councillor Albright had written a letter to the Fig City News stating that the purpose of this was to discourage youth smoking. But youth already can't smoke. The minimum legal age is 21. So putting this on people older than that is not going to change that. Kids will either start to smoke or they won't. But once they do, this is not going to stop them from smoking. So it's going to be an effect of, there's no way to measure the long-term outcome or consequences of the policy. And as we mentioned, they included the products which are safer, vapes, pouches, things like that. So, the city council was concerned about secondhand smoke, but if you're a parent and you want to continue to get your nicotine and you don't want to expose your kids, there are products that you could switch to, but those are now also prohibited.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
And then the other thing they said was, well, you talked about painting lines on the street. They said, well, we eliminate lead paint and we took asbestos out and we require motorcycle helmets and seatbelt laws. And some of those arguments are rational. Yes, seatbelt laws and helmets, that's the government telling you what you have to do for your own safety. But there's not 100% enforcement on those anyway. But comparing cigarette or tobacco to lead paint or asbestos is just honestly stupid, because those are environmental hazards you can't avoid at all if by your own actions.
Right.
But tobacco, it's a deliberate choice, and there's nobody in this environment, there's nobody in our world now who doesn't know that tobacco is dangerous.
Right.
It's all over the packs.
Right. So by that token, I'm a medical doctor, as I said, but apparently I'm a little bit different from some other medical doctors, because I put out the warning signs for the patients to understand this stuff, but I don't, insofar as anybody can, proscribe what people can't do. I think these things are always on an order, and they're on an economic scale of desire. Yeah. So, there are people putting on these squirrel suits. I don't know if you've seen these things. I have not done it. Maybe at that age I might have done it, because I did some spelunking and I did a little bit of rock climbing. But these are people who put on these flying squirrel suits.
Flying squirrels. Okay.
Yeah, well, they're not flying yet. They're putting squirrel
suits.
Wingsuits. Yeah, they put on these wingsuits and they jump off a cliff.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I would bet dollars to coffee cups that annualized out is more dangerous than their smoking that year. So if they're doing that on any given year, even a couple times, that's more dangerous than smoking for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And so, if we're going to completely order risks, then we can't do stuff. The snowboarding, people will die lots of different ways. And I think that smoking is kind of a pointless way to go. I don't personally smoke. I try to convince the people that come to me that it's like not something you want to do, because, you might get a joy from it, kind of get that relief, and maybe get a break that you wouldn't get, but it's going to inhibit your lung capacity. It's not lung cancer. Most people don't get lung cancer who smoke. Most everybody who smokes gets some emphysema and chronic bronchitis. So you get a diminishment in your lung capacity. You and I have spoken about, measurement, the quantified self, and and there's a device out there that we both love called Caliber Bio, which monitors this stuff, and you can get all kinds of things. But it's axiomatic that if you're smoking a long time, you're going to have less lung capacity. Okay, fine. Everybody knows that, and then it's up to you to let adults figure that stuff out. Because I don't tell people not to drive a motorcycle at all. I don't tell people to never go on what's the snowmobiles, or the squirrel suits or whatever, because that's stuff that people do. That's part of, if they're old enough to take up arms, and thank you for your defense of our country.
Thank you.
And they're old enough to do that. Frank, at 18, shouldn't even wait to 21. They should be able to get a beer when they want to, and they should be able to, buy their smokes with it. Yeah. And there's a great movie called Thank You for Smoking by Christopher Buckley. And it's a great book and a hilarious movie. But there's some aspects to this which is like, there are some things people do that are not going to be perfect, but that's kind of part of the mess and the fun of being alive.
Yes, and people do it deliberately. That's, the city council said, well, tobacco has no redeeming properties, so it's okay to ban it. But in fact, as you mentioned, people do it for their own trade-off. They decide, whether it's stress reduction or camaraderie, or hanging out with friends. I want to smoke because I prefer the near-term consequences now of feeling better. There's a reason for it. It's not like they just find a cigarette on the street and pick it up. They do it because it's deliberate. What I tried to tell the city council as I was doing the last couple minutes of my presentation to them, or not the city council, but the Program and Services Committee, is it's not the role of government to keep people safe. It's the role of government to set the conditions for individuals to pursue their life, liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. And those are two very different things. You can't live in a plastic bubble all the time. People take risk-seeking behavior all the time, whether it's driving or, as you said, skiing, or private pilots, which have a fairly high, fatality rate, or scuba diving, or squirrel suit flying, or whatever it might be. People choose to accept risks. They're adults. We accept in our society that when you turn a certain age, 18 or 21 or 25, depending on the product, that you are entitled to make adult decisions about your own body. And the City Council here has preempted that and said, we know better than you what's good for you.
The funny thing, the inimical thing, is that when people have those liberties, they do them, they enjoy them, and they have more reason to want to live longer. Getting back to my point, rewind this thing, my point about going to church and being married, have people live longer. Okay, the reason is that they have somebody to talk to. Having a dog makes you live longer. Okay, it doesn't make you live longer, but people with an animal,
people die sooner after their spouse passes.
So the real key is that what we are, what is kind of like the essential kind of poison or the kryptonite for our bodies is solitude. You go to prison, that's bad enough. You go to prison, and then you're really bad in prison, they put you in solitary confinement. So that's the thing that people want. Now, you know who did solitary confinement not that long ago? Do you remember?
No.
So there's a prison term called lockdown.
Oh, oh yeah.
It was developed in, I think, the 1990s, and I think, I'm not sure it was developed on TV or not, but it's a prison term, and it got popularized through TV conceptualizations of prisons. So that's how the term got to be in the public health community, frankly. Lockdowns with prisons. So there had never been a lockdown ever anywhere on earth for any epidemic, whatever you might call these things, until, I can't remember. My memory is all fogged now.
It's like about,
it's
like
all,
about
it's all
5 years
fogged.
ago. You're the authority on this, so absolutely.
So God forbid that the government would ever want to take away your rights to consort and enjoy each other's company, which is really the essence of life, and that is kind of the big conversation of life. Life's not so much a disagreement as it is an ongoing conversation. So I'm hoping that we can have this ongoing conversation. So where can people, kind of aggregate, coalesce to kind of further your point and to get this thing undone?
Well, so I do not think there is a mechanism to undo this, short of more city council action. There is an appeal process. That time window has passed, and I don't think that it would have been feasible to do. Obviously, if enough people voted in city councilors who were opposed to this, it's an ordinance, just like any other ordinance. They passed it by changing a couple lines in the tobacco ordinance. Instead of saying you have to be 21, they said you have to be born after March 1st, 2004. So I think it's kind of stuck here. Now, a couple of other things, though, about that are, first, there is an organization called Citizens for Adult Choice. And it's a website funded by the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers, so the local gas stations, because they bear the brunt of losing the revenue from this. And there's a website, so it's Citizens for Adult Choice, and they have news stories, they have where you can go to get more information, they post announcements about upcoming town meetings. Maybe about a dozen cities and towns in Massachusetts have implemented this or some version of it. But encouragingly, there have been a number of others, perhaps a dozen or so, who have looked at this and decided not to implement it, at least for now. Worcester, Milton, Peabody is working on a different project to allow to tighten the restrictions without banning it. The scary thing, and this is what people should take away, is the Supreme Court decision allowing this didn't specify that it applied to tobacco. So theoretically, any municipality could at some point decide that this should apply to cannabis, it could apply to alcohol, it could apply to any other thing for which there is already an age-limited or an age restriction, and they could simply say, we're going to, as you said, why not just ban it outright? They could just say, we're going to do this with alcohol. We're going to do this with cannabis. We're going to do it with casinos. We're going to do it with anything. They have the, it's permissible now. The precedent's already been set that the cities and towns, the municipalities can do what they want unless the legislature changes that.
Yeah. So we just have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of was thinking of certainly of the hypocrisies that, you know, there seems to be a lot more promotion of marijuana, and there's a lot more promotion of people kind of being on replacement narcotics. So there's methadone and Suboxone, and you know, clearly the state has come down on gender issues a certain way, which I think is counter to actual physical health and well-being, and certainly something that would have been thrown out on its ear, you know, not even maybe 15 years ago, whatever. And they just, you know, they have a certain mind about what's healthy, but I think it's really a stalking horse. I think it's something else. I don't think it's about health, but maybe you can speak to that.
Well, I won't go into the gender stuff, but as I said, I think it's not about health. Well, I mean, I'll take them at their word. The big proponents of this are a couple of counselors, and at least in Newton's case, outside public health authorities. And, you know, I can't speculate as to their motives. But as I said, the fact that this applies to non-tobacco products, vapes, pouches, and other things that contain nicotine so people could get their fix without producing the lung damage or the medical consequences suggests to me that it really isn't about reducing the number of cancer deaths in Massachusetts in 30 years, which there is no way to tell that this ordinance would have any impact on anyway. It is more that, you know, I'd be willing to bet that none of the city councilors smoke. I mean, I don't know. That's just a guess.
Yeah.
And they don't know anyone who smokes. And they, again, my hypothesis, and they just think it's icky and they don't like it.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it's, I certainly don't think it's going to get rid of anything that people think it's going to get rid of. They'll just find things by other means. And, you know, we've seen, you know, frankly, a lot more permissiveness towards methadone, which they changed the federal laws for methadone so that there can be methadone vans and people can get prescriptions to go to the pharmacy to get their methadone. They're going to try to take away methadone clinics, that whole institution thing. So there's kind of a liberalization, more stuff, ketamine, whatnot, hallucinogen, and marijuana, obviously. A lot of things that, you know, not that long ago were just, boom, illegal.
They were trying to get mushrooms or psychedelics on the ballot last year.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with harvesting, not just harvesting marijuana, but harvesting the tax dollars. And people make fun of the tariffs of Trump, but frankly, there's kind of a tariff aspect where the city of Newton and others will be able to kind of rake in a little bit, just talking about casinos and whatnot, kind of rake in some of the chips on the local things from cannabis that they can't do from cigarettes.
That may be part of it too. Again, don't know all their motives, but judge them by their actions.
All right. So we are Newton Taxpayer Association. We are sitting down for standing up for smart spending. So join us, please. Try to contact us, and we certainly appreciate your help and donations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.